The city lights of downtown blurred into a watercolor painting as rain fell in relentless sheets, smearing the neon signs across the wet pavement. For Arya Langford, the world was a cacophony of distorted colors and sounds, much like her life had become. At 25, she was an interior designer with a bright future, or so everyone thought. But her world was small, confined by the gilded cage built by Damon, her fiancé. Damon was a lawyer, all charm and polish on the outside, but underneath, his words were a slow-acting poison, chipping away at her confidence day by day. Tonight, the poison had been particularly potent. It happened at the Gilded Lily, a restaurant so exclusive you had to know someone just to get a reservation. Damon had chosen it, of course. He chose everything. The argument started over something trivial. Arya had laughed too loudly at a joke the waiter made. Damon's smile tightened, a familiar, chilling sight. "Must you be so common, Arya?" He'd hissed, his voice low enough that only she could hear, yet loud enough to feel like a slap. The public humiliation was his specialty. He'd continued his critique all the way to the valet, his words dissecting her every flaw, real or imagined. "You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourself." When he paused to tip the valet, Arya saw her chance. She didn't think, she just ran. Her heels slipped on the slick sidewalk, but she didn't care. She ran from his perfectly tailored suit, from his condescending smile, from the suffocating weight of his love. She plunged into the vibrant chaos of a street festival that had sprung up, a spontaneous celebration of light and music that seemed a world away from the cold marble of the restaurant. The thumping bass of a live band vibrated through the soles of her feet, a welcome distraction. She wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the sea of laughing, dancing strangers. But there was no escaping Damon. Arya, stop this nonsense right now." His voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the joyful noise, finding her with unnerving precision. Panic seized her, cold and absolute. She was a cornered animal. Her eyes darted around, searching for any escape, any shield. And then she saw him. He was leaning against a vendor's stall, a stark silhouette in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He stood out from the brightly clad festival goers like a shadow in a sunbeam. Tall, with dark hair that fell over his brow, he seemed utterly still amidst the swirling motion around him. He was watching her, his expression unreadable, but his gaze was steady, anchoring. As Damon's footsteps grew closer, a desperate, wild idea sparked in Arya's mind. It was insane. It was reckless. It was perfect. She closed the distance between them in 3 quick strides. Without a word, she reached up, tangled her fingers in the lapels of his suit jacket, and pulled him down to her. She kissed him. It wasn't a passionate kiss, not a romantic one. It was a kiss born of pure desperation, a frantic plea for invisibility. Her lips were soft against his, and for a breathtaking moment, the world complied with her wish. The blare of the music, the chatter of the crowd, the pounding rain, even Damon's approaching shouts, it all faded into a muffled hum. It was just the two of them, frozen in a bubble of impossible silence. He didn't pull away. He didn't push her back. He simply held still, allowing her this strange, impulsive act of rebellion. She felt the tension in his shoulders relax, as if he understood. When she finally, shakily, pulled back, gasping for air, she looked up into his eyes. And for a split second, a flash of something impossible, his eyes flickered, turning a brilliant, molten gold before returning to their normal, dark hue. She blinked, sure it was a trick of the neon lights, a hallucination brought on by stress and fear. Before she could process it, his voice, a low and resonant whisper that sent a shiver down her spine, wrapped around her. "Now you've started something you can't undo." The weight of his words settled over her, heavier than the rain-soaked air. The promise in them was terrifying, but for the first time all night, it wasn't Damon's voice she was hearing. It was the sound of a different kind of trap, one she had just willingly stepped into. If you've ever done something impulsive that changed everything, hit that subscribe button. You'll understand Arya's fear in a second. The golden flicker in his eyes, she dismissed it. It had to be a reflection. It had to be. But the intensity of his gaze held her captive. His name was Lucian Vale, though she didn't know it yet. All she knew was the man whose stillness had become her shield. Damon had stopped short, frozen in disbelief a dozen feet away. The sight of Arya kissing a stranger had finally rendered him speechless. He stood there, his handsome face contorted with a rage that promised a storm far worse than the one drenching the city. Lucian didn't even glance at Damon. His focus was entirely on Arya. His hand came up, not to touch her, but to hover near her cheek, a gesture of unnerving intimacy. "He's watching," Lucian murmured, his voice a low vibration she felt in her bones. "Do you want to leave with him, or with me?" The choice felt monumental, a crossroads that would define the rest of her life. Going back to Damon meant returning to the familiar, suffocating comfort of her cage. Going with this stranger, that was a leap into an abyss with golden eyes. "With you," she whispered, the words leaving her lips before she had fully formed the thought. It was another impulsive decision, another stitch in the tapestry of this insane night. Fear and exhilaration warred within her. This was the most terrifying and the most freeing moment of her life. Lucian gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "A wise choice," he said, his tone suggesting he knew far more about her situation than he possibly could. He finally turned his gaze toward Damon, and the air crackled. His expression was calm, almost bored, yet it held an authority that made Damon, the powerful lawyer, look small and petulant. "The lady is with me tonight," Lucian stated simply. It wasn't a question or a request. It was a declaration of fact. Damon sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Like hell she is." "Arya, get over here now," he commanded, taking a step forward. Lucian didn't move, but a palpable sense of danger emanated from him. "I wouldn't," he advised, his voice dropping to a near growl. And Damon, for the first time since Arya had known him, hesitated. He saw something in the stranger's eyes, something that made his bravado falter. He saw a predator, and he knew instinctively that he was outmatched. With a final, venomous glare at Arya, Damon spun on his heel and stalked away, swallowed by the crowd. He was gone, just like that. The invisible chains that had bound her for years loosened. Arya swayed on her feet, the adrenaline rush leaving her weak and trembling. A hand, firm and warm, steadied her elbow. It was Lucian. "Come," he said softly. "Let's get you out of the rain." He began to lead her away from the festival, his presence a solid, reassuring wall against the chaos. She followed without protest, her mind reeling. Who was this man? How did he make Damon back down with just a look? The kiss had been a desperate gamble, but the aftermath was something else entirely. It was a mystery, and she was now at the very center of it. She had started something, and the terrifying truth was, she had no idea what it was or how it would end. The morning sun streamed through my apartment window, but I barely noticed. My mind was still reeling from the previous night, replaying that impossible kiss with the stranger, the man who called himself Lucian. It felt like a dream, a feverish hallucination born from stress and exhaustion. I tried to dismiss it, to bury it under the weight of my ever-growing to-do list. Just as I was convincing myself it was all in my head, my phone buzzed with an email that made my heart leap into my throat. A summons. Not just any summons, but a request for a meeting from Vale Corporation, one of the biggest, most enigmatic conglomerates in the city. They were looking for an interior designer for their new flagship headquarters. This was it. The kind of project that could catapult my fledgling firm into the stratosphere. The kind of project that could finally let me breathe. A few hours later, I was stepping out of a cab in front of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. The Vale Tower. It was a monument of polished chrome and dark glass, imposing and utterly breathtaking. My portfolio felt flimsy in my hands as I walked through the cavernous, marble-floored lobby. Everything here screamed power, wealth, and an almost intimidating level of precision. An elevator, silent and impossibly fast, whisked me up to the penthouse floor. The doors slid open to a reception area that looked more like a modern art gallery than an office. A woman with a severe haircut and an even more severe expression greeted me. "Miss Thorne, Mr. Vale will see you now." My palms were slick with sweat as I followed her down a long hallway. She gestured toward a set of massive oak doors. "He's waiting." Taking a deep breath, I pushed the doors open and stepped into a corner office that offered a panoramic, godlike view of the city. My eyes scanned the room, taking in the minimalist furniture, the stark, powerful lines. And then they landed on him. He was standing by the window, silhouetted against the bright morning sky. He turned slowly, and the world tilted on its axis. It was him, the man from the woods, Lucian. My portfolio nearly slipped from my grasp. My mouth went dry. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair immaculately styled. The rugged, almost wild edge he had in the moonlight was gone, replaced by a veneer of cool corporate authority. He was even more devastatingly handsome under the fluorescent lights of power. "Miss Thorne," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that was completely devoid of recognition. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." I just stared, my brain short-circuiting. Was he pretending? Did he genuinely not remember me? I stammered, "Mr. Vale, it's an honor." He gestured to a chair in front of his massive desk. "Please." As I sat, his assistant, the woman from the reception, glided into the room and took a seat slightly behind him, her eyes fixed on me. She had a notepad, but her posture wasn't that of a secretary. It was that of a bodyguard. Her gaze was sharp, analytical, and deeply protective of the man at the desk. I got the distinct feeling that they all knew something I didn't, that I was walking into a play where everyone else had already memorized their lines. The meeting began. I tried to focus, to present my ideas with the passion and professionalism I was known for. I laid out my sketches, explained my vision for the space blending organic, natural elements with cutting-edge, sustainable technology. I spoke of creating an environment that was both powerful and nurturing. Lucien listened, his face an unreadable mask. He didn't interrupt. He just watched me. His eyes, the same intense silver gray I remembered from the night before, studied me with a quiet intensity that felt like a physical touch. It was unnerving. Every time our gazes locked, I felt a jolt, a silent, crackling pulse that ran through my veins. It was a dizzying mix of heat, curiosity, and a primal sense of danger. It wasn't the volatile, unpredictable danger I'd known with Damon. This was something else entirely. It was controlled, ancient, and infinitely more profound. He finally spoke, his voice dropping to a low tone that felt far too intimate for a boardroom. "Your vision. It's bold, Miss Thorne. You seem to understand the duality we're trying to achieve. Power and harmony. Not many can grasp that." The compliment hung in the air between us, charged with unspoken meaning. It felt less like professional praise and more like a personal acknowledgement, a secret shared between the two of us. My smartwatch, a new gadget I'd gotten to monitor my stress levels, buzzed discreetly against my wrist. I glanced down. My heart rate was spiking, 110, 115, 120 beats per minute. But I wasn't panicked. I wasn't having an anxiety attack. This feeling wasn't nerves. It was a strange thrumming energy, an inexplicable reaction to his proximity. It was as if my very biology was responding to him on a level I couldn't comprehend. He leaned forward slightly, his scent a subtle mix of crisp bergamot and something wild, like petrichor after a storm drifting across the desk. "I have a few questions about your material sourcing." As he spoke, his eyes never left mine. The intensity was magnetic. I felt myself being pulled into his orbit, drawn to the mystery and the sheer force of his presence. My instincts were screaming at me. They were telling me this man was dangerous, that he was a predator of the highest order hiding in plain sight. But they were also telling me that the danger wasn't directed at me. Not in the way I understood it. It was something deeper, something elemental. The meeting continued for what felt like an eternity and a second all at once. Every question he asked, every comment he made, felt layered with double meaning. The professional and the personal were blurring into an intoxicating, terrifying haze. He was the alpha in this boardroom, the undisputed king of this glass and steel castle, and I was utterly captivated. When the meeting finally concluded, I stood on shaky legs. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Vale." He stood as well, walking me to the door. His assistant shadowed his every move. "We'll be in touch, Miss Thorne," he said, his voice a low murmur near my ear. For a split second, I felt the heat of his body, saw the flecks of silver in his eyes up close. My smartwatch buzzed again, my heart rate soaring off the charts. It wasn't just attraction. It was a reaction, a resonance. Something supernatural was happening every time he was near, and my own body was the first to recognize it. I was drawn to him, and terrified, all at once. I walked out of that office with the contract of a lifetime seemingly within my grasp, but with the terrifying certainty that I had just stepped into a world far more complex and dangerous than I could ever imagine. And at its center was Lucien Vale. Thanks so much for watching. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The city noise, a constant dull roar, finally began to fade. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels both asleep and dangerously awake. I sat at my drafting table, the soft glow of my lamp pooling on a fresh sheet of paper. But I wasn't drawing buildings or landscapes tonight. I was drawing his eyes, Lucian's. I couldn't get them out of my head. That intense, almost amber gaze that seemed to see right through me. My charcoal pencil scratched against the paper, trying to capture that strange mix of warmth and wildness. It was an obsession, a puzzle I needed to solve with lines and shading. Each stroke was an attempt to understand the man I'd met only days ago, yet who felt like a figure from an old forgotten story. The first sketch was wrong, too human. The second, too animalistic. I crumpled it up, frustrated. How could an expression hold so much? It was like trying to draw the wind or capture the scent of rain on hot pavement. He was an enigma, wrapped in a tailored suit and a disarming smile. I remembered our conversation at the gallery opening, his voice a low, smooth melody that cut through the chatter. He'd talked about the city, its hidden pulse, its ancient heart. At the time, I thought it was just poetic flair. Now, I wasn't so sure. There was a depth to him, a knowledge that felt older than the skyscrapers around us. I started a third sketch. This time, I didn't think. I just let my hand move, guided by the memory of his presence. The curve of his brow, the way his lashes cast shadows, and those eyes, those hypnotic golden eyes. Slowly, something began to take shape on the paper, something that felt true. It was the look he'd given me just before he left, a look that was both a promise and a warning. My own reflection stared back at me from the dark window pane, a ghost in the glass. The city lights were a distant, blurry constellation behind me. I was so lost in the drawing in him that I barely registered the world outside my little bubble of light. Suddenly, with a sharp click and a groan, everything went black. My lamp died. The digital clock on the oven vanished. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. A total power outage. The sudden, absolute silence was more startling than the darkness. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I froze, my hand hovering over the drawing, the charcoal pencil a useless stick in my fingers. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drum in the oppressive quiet. "Okay, Arya," I whispered to myself, my voice sounding small and thin. "It's just the power. Happens all the time." But it didn't feel like all the time. It felt different, sinister. I stayed perfectly still, my eyes trying to adjust to the inky blackness. The familiar shapes of my apartment had dissolved into menacing, indecipherable shadows. The coat rack looked like a hunched figure. The stack of books on my coffee table resembled a crouching beast. My imagination, always my greatest asset, was now my worst enemy, painting terrifying pictures in the dark. I reached for my phone on the table, my fingers fumbling in the void. Where did I leave it? My breath hitched. The silence was so complete I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. Then, a flash. A brilliant, silent explosion of white light lit up the sky, illuminating my apartment for a split second. Lightning. And in that blinding flash, I saw it, reflected in the large window in front of me. It wasn't my reflection, not just my reflection. Standing directly behind my ghostly image in the glass, its form superimposed over the cityscape, was a wolf. Huge. Its fur was the color of shadow and smoke, its shoulders bunched with muscle, and its eyes glowed with a faint, predatory light. They were fixed on my reflection, on me. My throat closed. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even breathe. It was there, right behind me in my own locked apartment. The light vanished as quickly as it came, plunging me back into absolute darkness. My mind reeled. Had I seen it? Was it real? Or was it just a trick of the light, a phantom created by the storm and my overwrought nerves? My heart was a wild bird trapped in my chest, beating its wings raw. I forced myself to turn. Slowly, every muscle screaming in protest, I swiveled in my chair. My body braced for impact, for teeth, for claws. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing. Just the familiar, empty space of my living room, now a cavern of shifting shadows. The coat rack was just a coat rack. The books were just books. There was no wolf, no creature, just me, alone in the dark, my heart threatening to beat its way out of my chest. I scrambled for my phone again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control them. I finally found it, its cold, smooth surface, a small comfort. I fumbled with the screen, turning on the flashlight. The narrow, bright beam cut through the darkness, darting around the room, confirming what my eyes were telling me. Empty. I was alone, but the image was seared into my brain. The sheer size of it, the intelligent, hunting gleam in its eyes. It wasn't just an animal. It was something more. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm the frantic thumping in my chest. It was the lightning, Arya. I chanted under my breath. A reflection. Your tired mind playing tricks on you. I repeated it over and over, a desperate mantra against the terror that was coiling in my stomach. But I didn't believe it. Not for a second. What I saw felt ancient and real. As real as the charcoal dust on my fingertips. I spent the rest of the night huddled on my sofa, wrapped in a blanket, jumping at every creak of the building, at every distant rumble of thunder. I didn't even try to sleep. The power came back on around dawn, the sudden hum of the fridge making me yelp. The warm, familiar lights of my apartment did little to chase away the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The city, my home, no longer felt safe. It felt like a jungle, and I had just realized I was prey. The morning light felt weak, filtered through a gray, overcast sky. I was nursing a cup of coffee, my hands still trembling slightly, when my phone rang. The screen lit up with a name I wasn't expecting. Lucian. My heart did a nervous flip. I hesitated, then answered, trying to make my voice sound normal. Hello, Arya. His voice was that same low, smooth melody, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't place. Concern? I heard the power went out in your district last night. I just wanted to call and check that you're safe. The coffee cup stalled halfway to my lips. My blood ran cold. The casual question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. How? How would he know? It was a city-wide outage, sure, but why would he specifically call to check on me? We barely knew each other. We weren't friends who checked in after a storm. It wasn't a normal thing to do. The image of the wolf in the reflection flashed in my mind, its glowing eyes staring right at me. A chilling coincidence? Or something more? I'm fine, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Just a bit of a scare in the dark, that's all. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A heavy, knowing silence that stretched for an eternity. I could almost feel his intense gaze through the phone. Then, he spoke again, and his voice dropped, becoming soft, intimate, and terrifyingly serious. Don't walk alone at night, Arya, he said, the words a gentle caress and a chilling command all at once. There are wolves in this city and not all of them obey me. If you've ever had someone in your life who seemed to know too much, who made you feel both protected and watched, then subscribe now. Because you'll need all the courage you can get for what's coming next. This story is just beginning. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to hit that follow button so you don't miss a single moment. The clang of metal on metal was the soundtrack to my life now. Each strike of the hammer, a penance. I was restoring a vintage carousel, its faded glory a mirror of my own. I was just Arya, the girl who fixed things, trying to mend my own fractured past. The scent of sawdust and old paint was a comfort, a shield against the world I'd left behind. Then, that shield shattered. Arya. The voice was a ghost I thought I'd exorcised. I froze, my hand hovering over a half-sanded wooden horse. Slowly, I turned. Damon stood there, silhouetted against the bright workshop entrance. He looked diminished. The expensive suit was rumpled. His usually perfect hair was a mess, and his eyes held a desperation I'd never seen before. It was a stark contrast to the confident, charming man who had once swept me off my feet and then tried to clip my wings. What are you doing here, Damon? My voice was colder than I expected, a tool I'd sharpened in his absence. He took a step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Arya, please, just hear me out. I was wrong. I was an idiot, a complete and utter fool. He looked around the workshop, at the half-finished projects, the scattered tools. This isn't you. You belong in a gallery, not a garage. There it was. The subtle dig, the casual dismissal of my passion. The same old Damon, wrapped in a new package of fox remorse. This is my work, I said, my grip tightening on the sander. This is what I love. Something you never understood. I can understand. I will, he pleaded, his voice cracking. He moved closer, trying to bridge the gap between us, the chasm of his betrayal. Everything I did, it was because I love you. I was scared of losing you. I know I messed up, locking you away, trying to control you. But I can change. We can go back to how it was. Go back? A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Go back to being your pretty little bird in a gilded cage? No thank you. I'm finally free, Damon. I'm breathing again. He reached for my hand. Arya, don't say that. Give me one more chance. Just one. I'll do anything. I'll support your work. I'll build you the biggest workshop you've ever seen. Anything you want. His touch was like ice, sending a shiver of revulsion through me. I pulled my hand away just as a shadow fell over us. A new presence filled the space, sucking the very air from the room. Lucien. He stood by the entrance, silent and imposing. He wasn't as tall as Damon, but he seemed to take up more space, his aura a physical force. He wore a simple, dark sweater and jeans, but he radiated more power than Damon ever had in his most expensive tailored suit. His gaze was fixed on Damon, a cold, analytical fire burning in his eyes. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a declaration. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken threats. It was primal. Two alpha predators, sizing each other up over territory. My workshop, my life, had suddenly become their hunting ground. Damon, who always commanded every room he entered, seemed to shrink under Lucien's silent scrutiny. The desperation in his eyes morphed into a flicker of fear, then resentment. Who the hell are you? Damon finally spat out, his voice a low growl. Lucien didn't answer. He just took a slow, deliberate step into the workshop. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, never left Damon's face. It was the most commanding silence I had ever witnessed. Every ounce of Damon's blustering confidence evaporated. He was outmatched, and he knew it. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, it was almost dizzying. Lucien's gaze flicked to me for a fraction of a second. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Are you okay? I gave a barely perceptible nod. That was all he needed. His attention snapped back to Damon, the pressure intensifying. I could almost feel the invisible force field emanating from him, pushing Damon back. Damon took an involuntary step backward, then another. He looked from Lucien's unyielding face to my resolute one, defeated, but not broken. A familiar venom laced his voice as he retreated toward the door. Fine, he whispered, his eyes locked on me, a promise of future trouble in their depths. He then turned his glare on Lucien. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he hissed, the words a parting shot meant to wound, to intimidate. Then he was gone, swallowed by the afternoon light, leaving a toxic echo in his wake. The tension didn't immediately dissipate. It lingered, clinging to the sawdust in the air. Lucien remained by the door, a silent guardian. The silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was watchful. Are you all right? His voice, when it finally came, was deep and steady, a stark contrast to Damon's frantic pleading. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I am now. Thank you. I looked at him, truly looked at him. Who was this man? This enigma who had appeared in my life just when I needed a bulwark against my past. You didn't have to do that. Yes, he said, his expression unreadable. I did. He walked over to the carousel horse I'd been working on, running a hand over the smooth, curved wood. His fingers were long and graceful, a musician's hands, yet they seemed to hold an incredible strength. He won't bother you again. It wasn't a promise. It was a fact. And for some reason, I believed him. But Damon's final words echoed in my mind. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The warning was for Lucien, but it felt like it was for me too. That night, sleep offered no escape. My dreams were a chaotic tempest of fear and fascination. I was in a grand marble courtroom, but the judge, the jury, the lawyers, they were all wolves. Their eyes glowed in the dim light, their growls echoing like gavels. Damon was there, pointing a finger at me, his face contorted in a snarl. The wolves began to close in, their teeth bared, ready to tear everything apart. I felt a primal fear, a certainty that I was about to be devoured. But then, one wolf stepped forward, larger than the rest. Its fur was as black as midnight, and its eyes were Lucien's. It didn't growl, it didn't snarl, it just stood before me, a silent, powerful protector, and the other wolves backed away, whining, their aggression melting into submission. The giant wolf looked at me, and in its gaze, I saw not a beast, but a fierce, untamable spirit that somehow felt safe. I woke with a gasp, my heart pounding against my ribs, my skin slick with a cold sweat. The dream was so vivid, so visceral. The image of the wolves, the feeling of the cold marble floor, the scent of fear. And through it all, the overwhelming presence of that one dark wolf. One name escaped my lips, a shaky whisper in the darkness of my bedroom. Lucien. Who was he? What was he? A man? A protector? Or something else entirely? Something wilder, more dangerous, and infinitely more compelling than anything I had ever known. And why, after everything Damon had put me through, was the thought of that danger not terrifying, but thrilling? I had escaped one cage, only to find myself drawn to the edge of a wilderness I didn't understand, and I had a feeling there was no turning back. The ride out of Chicago was a blur of city lights melting into inky darkness. Lucien's driver was silent, the purr of the luxury car the only sound. As we left the familiar skyline behind, I clutched my portfolio a little tighter, the leather cool against my clammy hands. A design consultation. That's what he'd called it. But the tremor that had started in my bones the moment his lips touched mine told me this was something else entirely. Something more. We turned onto a long winding driveway, flanked by ancient pines that seemed to claw at the moonlight. They stood like silent sentinels guarding a forgotten kingdom. And then I saw it. The mansion. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of dark stone and gleaming glass, a modern castle dropped into the heart of the woods. It was both magnificent and menacing, a perfect reflection of the man who owned it. Lucien was waiting for me at the top of the grand entrance stairs, silhouetted against the light spilling from within. He wore a simple black shirt and dark trousers, a stark contrast to his usual tailored suits. He looked less like a CEO and more like a predator in his natural habitat. "Arya," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the cool night air. "I'm glad you came. You don't leave a girl much choice, do you?" I managed, my attempt at a joke falling flat. I walked up the marble steps, my heels clicking an anxious rhythm. He just smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. "Come inside." He led me through a cavernous foyer. The interior was a breathtaking mix of classic architecture and hyper-modern design. Polished marble floors, soaring ceilings, art that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. It was a designer's dream. But as I followed him, my gaze caught on something that sent a shiver down my spine. Deep, deliberate gouges were carved into one of the massive marble columns by the main doorway. Not one or two, but a series of them, raked down the stone with incredible force. They looked like claw marks, huge ones. "Renovation plans?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, pointing a shaky finger at the column. Lucien stopped and turned. The playful glint in his eyes was gone, replaced by an unnerving seriousness. He followed my gaze to the marks. "Something like that," he murmured, his eyes locking onto mine. "It's a reminder of what happens when you lose control." He took a step closer, and the air crackled with the same electric energy I'd felt during our kiss. "I didn't bring you all the way out here to discuss color palettes and furniture, Arya." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Then why am I here, Lucien?" He stared at me, his gaze so intense it felt like he was peeling back every layer, looking right into my soul. "Because you deserve the truth. Because that kiss. It wasn't just a kiss." He gestured around the opulent hall. "This empire, my company, it's a front, a way to move through your world." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "I'm not just a CEO, Arya. I lead a pack that hides in plain sight." My mind raced, trying to process his words. Pack? Hiding? It sounded like something ripped from a fantasy novel. But the look in his eyes, the raw honesty, the sheer absurdity of it all, it felt terrifyingly real. "That kiss," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he closed the distance between us. "It marked you. It connected you to me too. Us." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing my cheek, and a jolt, hot and wild, shot through me. It wasn't unpleasant. It was familiar. "Now you feel what I feel. The pull of the moon, the hum of the city, the hunt." I should have been terrified. I should have been running for the door, screaming my head off. A sane person would have. But as he spoke, something deep inside me, something dormant and forgotten, stirred. It wasn't fear that filled my veins. It was recognition, like hearing a song from your childhood you thought you'd forgotten. It was a feeling of coming home. I looked from the claw marks on the column to the raw power simmering in his eyes, and it all clicked into place. The strange energy I'd always felt, the feeling of being an outsider in my own life, the magnetic pull I felt towards him. It wasn't a crush. It was a calling. I swallowed, my own voice, barely a whisper. What does that mean? For me? He saw the acceptance in my eyes, the lack of fear, and a hint of relief softened his expression. He knew I understood. On some primal level, he knew I wasn't going to run. Not yet, anyway. But then his voice turned soft, almost regretful, laced with a threat that was also a plea. It means you're part of my world now, whether you want to be or not. He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. And if you walk away, he whispered, the words a silken trap, every wolf in my city will sense your scent. From that day on, Lucian became my shadow, or perhaps I became his. We were inseparable, two celestial bodies caught in an unforeseen orbit. Every morning began with the soft clink of his tools next to mine, a silent greeting that spoke more than words ever could. We worked side by side, our days, a tapestry woven from whispered conversations over dusty blueprints and shared smiles over lukewarm coffee. The world around us faded into a muted backdrop. The only thing that felt real was the space between us, a space that seemed to shrink with every passing hour. There was this invisible string, pulling us closer, tighter. It was in the way he'd instinctively move to shield me from a gust of wind, the way his hand would hover near the small of my back as we navigated a tricky patch of ground, never quite touching, yet I could feel the warmth of his presence like a brand. It was in the silent glances we exchanged across the dig site, a shared look that could convey a novelty's worth of emotion. His eyes, those captivating pools of ancient starlight, would find mine, and for a breathtaking moment, the universe would hold its breath. In those moments, I felt seen, not just as the woman who'd survived, but as Arya, just Arya. The tension was a living thing, a third presence in every room we occupied. It was a low hum beneath the surface of our polite conversations, a static charge that made the air crackle. I found myself becoming hyper-aware of him. The subtle scent of pine and old books that clung to him, the way a stray lock of dark hair fell across his brow when he was focused, the low melodic timbre of his voice that seemed to vibrate right through me. My own body was a traitor, my heart hammering against my ribs whenever he was near, my breath catching in my throat. It was maddening. It was exhilarating. One sweltering afternoon, I was perched on a rickety scaffolding, meticulously brushing away dirt from a newly unearthed fresco. My focus was absolute, the rest of the world a blur. I reached for a different brush, leaning just a bit too far. The world tilted. The wooden plank beneath my feet gave a sickening groan and then splintered. For a split second, I was suspended in air, a gasp trapped in my throat, my life flashing before my eyes. Not again. I couldn't go through that terror again. But I didn't hit the ground. A blur of motion, impossibly fast, and then I was encased in strength. Strong arms were wrapped around me, holding me securely against a solid chest. I looked up, dazed, into Lucian's face. He hadn't been anywhere near me a second ago. It was impossible. He'd moved faster than a blink, faster than humanly possible. He lowered me to the ground as if I weighed nothing, his grip firm but gentle. Are you all right? His voice was a low rumble, laced with a concern so profound it stole the air from my lungs. I could only nod, my mind reeling, trying to process what had just happened. His reflexes, they weren't just good, they were inhuman. The logic I had clung to my entire life, the neat little boxes I put the world into, were shattering. There was no rational explanation for how he had saved me. He didn't let go right away. His hands lingered on my arms, and I could feel the frantic thumping of my own heart. But beneath it, I could feel his. A steady, powerful rhythm that was somehow different, slower, stronger. It was like feeling the pulse of the earth itself. The logical part of my brain screamed at me to pull away, to run from this man who defied all reason. But the rest of me, the part that had felt so lost and broken for so long, leaned into his strength. That incident shifted something fundamental between us. The questions I had been pushing down now screamed for answers. Who was he? What was he? He had saved me. He had looked at me, not with pity, but with a fierce, protective light in his eyes. He made me feel safe, and I hadn't realized how desperately I craved that feeling until he gave it to me. The connection between us only deepened. We found ourselves talking late into the night, long after the work crews had gone home. We'd sit among the ruins, the moonlight painting silver patterns on the ancient stones. I told him things I'd never told anyone, about the accident, about the nightmares that still haunted me, the cold grip of fear that would seize me in the dead of night. He listened, his gaze never wavering, offering not empty platitudes, but a profound, silent understanding that soothed the raw edges of my soul. He, in turn, spoke of a world I couldn't comprehend, a world of shadows and starlight, of ancient pacts and forgotten lore. He spoke in metaphors and allegories, painting pictures with his words that were both beautiful and terrifying. My mind struggled to reconcile his stories with the man sitting before me, the man who knew how to make me laugh with a dry, witty comment, the man whose presence was a steady anchor in my chaotic world. Every time we were close, it felt like the very air was charged with electricity. I was acutely aware of the warmth of his body, the rhythm of his breathing. My own pulse seemed to want to fall into sync with his, a strange and powerful harmony I couldn't explain. One evening, a sudden noise from the darkened ruins sent a jolt of pure panic through me. My breath hitched, my heart seized, and the familiar cold sweat broke out on my skin. The shadows twisted into menacing shapes, the past reaching out to drag me back under. I started to tremble, my hands clenching into fists. Arya, Lucian's voice was soft, cutting through the fog of my terror. He moved in front of me, not touching, but creating a barrier between me and the encroaching darkness. "Look at me." I forced my eyes to meet his. "Breathe with me," he murmured, his voice a calming balm. "In and out, match my breathing." He took a slow, deliberate breath, his chest rising and falling in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. I tried to follow, my own breaths ragged and shallow at first. "That's it," he encouraged gently. "Focus only on my voice, on my breathing. In and out." He had moved closer, so close our faces were mere inches apart. I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin, see the infinite galaxies swirling in his eyes. The scent of pine and night air filled my senses, grounding me. The chaotic drumming in my chest began to slow, falling into step with the steady, powerful beat of his. The trembling subsided. The shadows receded, losing their power. In that small space between us, suspended in the quiet of the night, the world fell away. There was no dig site, no past trauma, no impossible secrets. There was only Lucian. His calm presence was a fortress, and for the first time since the accident, for the first time in years, the gnawing fear that lived in my bones finally, blessedly, went silent. I felt completely, utterly safe. It was a feeling more intimate than any touch, a connection that ran deeper than skin and bone. It was the moment I realized that whatever he was, human or not, my world was irrevocably and terrifyingly tilting on its axis, with him at its very center. If you're rooting for Arya to find real love after all the pain she's been through, prove it. Hit that subscribe button. Let her know you're here for her on this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter of our story. The whispers started as a low hum in the pack, a ripple of unease that soon became a roar I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just pack gossip. It was something bigger, something dangerous. The name on everyone's lips was Rael, and the chilling part, he was Lucian's brother. A rogue alpha, they called him, exiled years ago for his insatiable ambition and cruelty. Now, he was back, and he wasn't just challenging Lucian for control of the pack. He wanted me. My days, once filled with the intoxicating discovery of a hidden world and a love I never thought possible, were now tinged with a creeping dread. The way pack members looked at me changed. It wasn't with the gentle curiosity of before, but with a guarded, fearful pity. I tried to ask Lucian about it, but he would just hold me tight, his jaw tense, and murmur that everything was fine, that he would handle it. But I could feel the storm brewing in the top muscles of his back, see it in the haunted shadows under his eyes. One evening, I returned to Lucian's sprawling, modern mansion from my part-time job at the campus library, a sense of foreboding clinging to me like the damp evening air. I followed the low murmur of voices to Lucian's study, the heavy oak door slightly ajar. I knew I shouldn't eavesdrop, but a force I couldn't name compelled me to stop to listen. Lucian's voice, usually a calm and commanding baritone, was laced with a fury I had never heard before. "He will not touch her. He won't even get close." Another voice, older and gravelly, I recognized it as Silas. Lucian's beta replied, "Alpha, Rael is not just making a play for leadership. He knows about the mark. He knows she's the key." My blood ran cold. The mark, the delicate, shimmering pattern on my wrist that had appeared the night Lucian and I first, the night we'd truly connected. It was a symbol of our bond, something I treasured as a secret, beautiful part of my new life. How could Rael know about it? Silas continued, his voice heavy with grim certainty. He's been watching you, watching her. He knows you broke the ancient law. If he gets his hands on her, he won't just use her to challenge you. He'll drag her into the human world and show them the mark. He'll expose us all. He'll use her to ignite a war, the world tilted on its axis. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a gasp. This wasn't just about pack politics or a sibling rivalry. My life, Lucian's life, the very existence of their hidden world, it was all hanging by a thread, and I was the one holding the scissors. The weight of it was crushing. I wasn't just a girl who had fallen in love with a man who happened to be a werewolf. I was a liability, a weapon that could be turned against the man I loved and everyone he was sworn to protect. Danger wasn't just a concept anymore. It was a living, breathing entity, and it was hunting me. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stumbled back to our bedroom, the lavish decor feeling like a gilded cage. When Lucian found me later, he didn't need to ask what was wrong. The terror must have been written all over my face. He sat beside me on the edge of the bed, taking my hands in his. They were cold as ice. "Arya," he began, his voice impossibly gentle. "I know you heard. I'm so sorry." Tears I hadn't realized I was holding back began to fall. "What are we going to do? He wants to use me to destroy you, to destroy everything." Lucian's gaze was intense, filled with a desperate, heartbreaking love. "There is one way, a way to guarantee your safety, to remove you from this completely." He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "Our magic is ancient. There are rituals. I can have your memories erased. All of them. Of me, of the pack, of everything that's happened since we met. You would go back to your life as it was. You'd be safe. Rail would have no reason to come after you because you wouldn't know anything. You wouldn't be a threat." I stared at him, my heart shattering into a million pieces. Erase my memories? Erase him? The thought was a physical blow. Go back to the person I was before him? That girl felt like a stranger now. My life before Lucian felt like a black and white photograph, and he had colored it in. To forget the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the safety of his arms, the sheer unadulterated joy of knowing him. It was a fate worse than death. "No," I whispered, the word barely audible. I found my strength, my voice growing firmer as I looked him in the eye. "Absolutely not. You want to take away the best thing that has ever happened to me? You think that's protecting me? That's not protection, Lucian. That's erasure. I am not a problem to be solved or a secret to be buried. I love you, and I will not forget you." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something beyond alpha strength in his eyes, helplessness. He wanted to argue, to insist, but he saw the iron resolve in my gaze. I wouldn't let him sacrifice our love, even if it was to save me. We would face this together, or not at all. The next few days were a blur of strained silence and watchful eyes. I moved back to my own small apartment off campus, a mutual, unspoken decision that putting distance between us might make me less of an immediate target. It felt wrong, leaving the sanctuary of his arms, but it seemed like the only logical choice. The loneliness was a constant ache. One rainy Tuesday night, I was trying to study for my midterms, but the words on the page just swam before my eyes. All I could think about was Lucian. A sudden knock on my apartment door made me jump. It was late. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart leaped, hoping, praying it was him, that he couldn't stand being apart any longer. I peered through the peephole but saw nothing. My building's hallway light was notoriously faulty. With a sigh, I unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack. And my world stopped. Standing there wasn't Lucian. The man was taller, leaner, with the same striking, aristocratic features, the same piercing eyes, but his were a cold, chilling silver instead of Lucian's warm gold. A cruel, knowing smile played on his lips. He was the dark reflection in a shattered mirror, the embodiment of the fear that had haunted my every waking moment. It was Rail. In his hand he held a single, perfect black rose, its petals the color of midnight. He extended it towards me, his smile widening. "Arya," he purred, his voice a silken threat. I've been so looking forward to meeting you. The city lights blurred into a watercolor painting as Alara sat across from Rail in the dimly lit, exclusive rooftop bar he'd chosen. He had this uncanny ability to make even the most public places feel intensely private, as if a bubble existed only for the two of them. His voice was a low, melodic hum, weaving a story of a misunderstood soul, a lone wolf pushed to the fringes by a rigid pack that didn't appreciate his passion. Lucian, Rail began, swirling the dark liquid in his glass, his eyes never leaving hers. He talks about order, about control, but what he fears is chaos. He fears the very thing that makes us alive, the wildness that sings in our blood. Alara found herself leaning in, captivated. He wasn't the monster the stories made him out to be. He was just different. He believes in protecting the pack, she offered softly, feeling a strange need to defend Lucian, yet also drawn to Rail's perspective. Protecting them or caging them? Rail countered, his smile a flash of white in the shadows. He wants to tame the wild, Alara. But you were never meant for a cage. I've watched you. There's a fire in you that Lucian has been trying to smother with duty and responsibility. His words resonated in a place she hadn't dared to explore. Hadn't she felt that same restlessness? That longing for something more than just being the alpha's mate? Rail reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. A jolt different from Lucian's electric touch, but just as potent, shot up her arm. It was a spark of untamed energy, of rebellion. He sees you as a partner, an asset, Rail continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He thinks he's molding you into his equal. But you were never his equal, Alara. You were meant for someone wild, someone who sees the storm inside you and isn't afraid to dance in it. Someone like me. The intensity in his gaze was hypnotic. The initial charm, the smooth words were starting to peel away, revealing something far more possessive underneath. A flicker of unease went through her. This wasn't just a difference in philosophy. This was an obsession. He wasn't just admiring her from afar. He was staking a claim. She gently pulled her hand back. Rail, I think you're misinterpreting things. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes darkened. Am I? Or are you just afraid to admit that I'm right? The evening continued, a delicate dance of words. Rail was charming, witty, and undeniably magnetic. He spoke of freedom, of running under the moon without a care, of a world where their powers weren't something to be hidden but celebrated. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to be swept away by the fantasy. It was a tempting illusion, a beautiful lie painted over a canvas of discontent. But as he walked her back towards her apartment building, the city's hum felt less like a lullaby and more like a warning siren. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and twist. The moon is full tonight, Rail said, his voice now devoid of its earlier warmth. It was flat, determined. A perfect night for a new beginning. Before she could question him, his hand shot out, grabbing her arm. It wasn't the gentle touch from the bar. It was a grip of unyielding steel. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the romantic haze he had so carefully constructed. Rail, what are you doing? Let go of me, she demanded, her voice trembling. He ignored her, his eyes fixed on the enormous, silvery orb hanging in the night sky. A primal energy seemed to radiate from him, his features sharpening, his posture coiling like a predator about to strike. The handsome man from the bar was gone, replaced by something ancient and hungry. You belong with me, Alara, he growled, the sound vibrating in his chest. Lucian can have his pack and his rules. I'm taking what's mine. He pulled her into a dark alleyway, the sudden transition from the lit street to the oppressive darkness making her gasp. The scent of rain-soaked asphalt and decay filled her nostrils. Panic began to claw at her throat. This was a nightmare. This was the monster from the stories. No, she screamed, struggling against his hold. But it was like fighting against a mountain. Lucian. The name was a desperate, instinctual cry, a prayer sent out into the void. Miles away, in the quiet of his study, Lucian froze. The pen in his hand clattered onto the polished desk. He'd been trying to focus on pack business, trying to push down the gnawing anxiety that had been hounding him ever since Alara had left to meet Rail. He had trusted her strength. But this was different. It hit him like a physical blow, a wave of pure, unadulterated terror flooding their psychic bond. It wasn't just nervousness or unease. It was the primal fear of a cornered animal. Alara's fear. It was a scream that echoed not in his ears, but in the very core of his soul. Her panic became his. Her desperation fueled a rage he hadn't felt in years. The calm, controlled alpha Fod shattered into a million pieces. The papers on his desk scattered as he slammed his hands down, a guttural roar tearing from his throat. His bones began to crack and shift, the sound echoing in the silent room. His muscles bunched and writhed under his skin, tearing through the fine fabric of his shirt. His senses exploded. He could smell the ozone in the air, the distant scent of the city, and underneath it all, faint but clear, Alar's unique scent tainted by the acrid smell of her fear and the musky, predatory scent of Rael. His transformation was brutally fast, fueled by adrenaline and a white-hot fury. The civilized man was gone. In his place stood the true alpha form, a hulking, bipedal creature of nightmare and legend. Larger than a man, covered in thick, dark fur, with claws that could shred steel and eyes that burned with golden, predatory light. He didn't bother with the door. With another earth-shaking roar, he smashed through the reinforced window, sending glass and splintered wood flying into the night. He landed on the lawn 3 stories below in a silent crouch, the ground trembling under his weight. He lifted his head, nostrils flaring as he tasted the air, pinpointing the direction of her terror. He let out a howl that wasn't a call, but a declaration of war, a promise of retribution that rattled the windows of the neighboring houses and sent a chill down the spine of every creature, natural or supernatural, within a 5-mile radius. Rael had crossed a line. He hadn't just challenged an alpha, he had stolen his heart. And for that, there would be no mercy. The hunt was on. You can't pause now. Subscribe before your next heartbeat. Because what happens when an alpha unleashes his full, unrestrained fury to save his mate is something you will not want to miss. The clash that's coming will shake the very foundations of their world. Hit that subscribe button and brace yourself. Here, among the skeletal remains of forgotten rose bushes and ivy-choked trellises, the final act begins. The air crackles, thick with a tension that's been brewing for centuries. Lucien is no longer Lucien. He is a beast of nightmare and legend, a creature born of moonlight and rage. His form is a hulking silhouette of muscle and dark fur against the distant neon glow. Each guttural growl that rips from his throat is a promise of violence, a sound that shakes the very concrete beneath his paws. His eyes, once warm and brown, now burn with the cold silver fire of the full moon. Across from him stands Rael. He hasn't transformed, not yet. He remains defiantly human, a smirk playing on his lips, a cruel glint in his eyes. He's dressed in a tailored black coat, looking more like he's heading to an exclusive club than a fight to the death. The wind whips his hair, but he doesn't flinch. He just watches his brother, the monster, with a look of detached amusement, almost pity. Look at you, brother. Rael's voice is smooth, cutting through the low growls. Reduced to this, a mindless animal, slavering for a scrap. Is this what she's made you? Pathetic. He takes a deliberate step forward, his expensive shoes crunching on fallen leaves. The words are a spark to gasoline. With a roar that echoes between the skyscrapers, Lucien lunges. He's not a man anymore. He's a force of nature, a blur of shadow and claw. The distance between them vanishes in a heartbeat. He's a cannonball of pure fury, aimed directly at his brother's heart. Rael's smirk finally falters, his eyes widening as the reality of the alpha's power crashes down on him. This is it, the culmination of a blood feud centuries in the making. But just as Lucien's claws are inches from tearing into Rael's throat, a figure darts between them, a flash of white in the darkness. It's Arya. Her face is pale, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but her eyes are blazing with a fierce, unwavering determination. She stands with her arms outstretched, a fragile barrier between 2 warring titans. Stop. Her voice isn't a plea, it's a command. It cuts through the primal rage, a clear, human sound in a world gone mad. She stands her ground, her gaze locked on the silver eyes of the wolf. She doesn't look at Rael. Her entire world, her entire focus, is on the beast before her. Lucien, please, this isn't you. The wolf hesitates. The forward momentum of his attack halts so abruptly that he skids, his claws gouging deep grooves into the rooftop tiles. A confused, pained whine escapes his throat. He's trapped between the insatiable bloodlust of the curse and the undeniable authority in her voice. He sees her, really sees her, not just as prey or an obstacle, but as Arya, his Arya. Rael, recovering from his shock, lets out a bitter laugh. Touching, truly. But he can't hear you, darling. The alpha only understands one language, and it's the one I'm about to speak. He starts to move, to take advantage of the distraction, but Arya's voice rings out again, sharper this time. Lucian, look at me. She takes a tentative step closer, her hand extended, palm open. She isn't afraid. And that courage, that insane, beautiful bravery in the face of a monster, is a key turning a lock that has been rusted shut for generations. It's a direct challenge to the ancient curse, the one that decreed brother must kill brother. Her love is a defiance. Something shifts in the wolf's silver eyes, a flicker of warmth, of recognition. The brutal, angular lines of the beast begin to soften. The fur seems to recede, the massive shoulders to shrink. A tremor runs through his entire body, a violent, agonizing spasm as the transformation reverses itself. Bones crack and reshape, muscles contract. The guttural growls morph into gasps of pain. He collapses, falling to his knees. No longer a wolf, but a man. Lucian, naked and trembling, his body slick with sweat. He's breathing heavily, his head bowed. The raw power of the alpha has retreated, pushed back by something even stronger. He looks up at her, his human eyes filled with awe, gratitude, and a profound, heart-wrenching shame for the monster he almost became. He reaches out, his hand shaking, and gently takes hers. He brings it to his lips, his breath still ragged. You tamed the alpha, he whispers, the words barely audible over the distant city hum. It's a surrender, a confession, a vow. In that moment, kneeling before her on a forgotten rooftop, he is entirely hers. The curse of blood rivalry, for the first time in history, has been broken. But the moment of peace is shattered. From the deep shadows at the edge of the garden, a voice echoes, dripping with malice and a chilling promise. Rael is gone, vanished into the darkness, but his presence lingers, a cold spot in the air. She may have your mark, brother. The voice seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Lucian's head snaps up, searching the shadows, his expression turning from relief to pure dread. But she has my blood. And from the darkness, 2 points of light appear, glowing with an unnatural, predatory fire. Rael's eyes, watching them, waiting. The war isn't over. It's only just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey.